Okay, we're recording. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Zoom call with Garret. And the title of this call is, God, I've forgotten. Free will and personal responsibility. Do we have either? Now, I'm not big on introductions. I can't say I really know you well, Garret. I know you very little. I spoke to you last Sunday, and it was really, really great speaking to you. When I first read some of your posts, I thought to myself, who on earth is this guy? And why should I listen to him? And I was just really, really, really resistant to what you had to say until a new thought occurred, and I thought, why not listen? And then Tracy spontaneously started a conversation about free will, personal responsibility. Do we have either? And we had a conversation in my group the first time, and then the second time, and some people turned up late. So then we decided to do it again. And what ensued, what happened in that conversation was absolutely wonderful. It was heartwarming. It was a privilege to be in the same room with people who just supported and really, really loved the individual who really needed a space to be held, loved, and supported. So then I thought, okay, I want to speak to Garret. And I guess, so I'm going to just pass on the buck to you, just to have, not just to you, and to people who want to ask questions. I personally have one question, but I don't have to ask it now. I didn't come prepared. So for me, it's an open conversation. Is that okay with you? Can they ask you anything, Garret?
Of course. Yeah, that's a good way to start. Just anybody ask me a question about free will or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, okay.
Sorry, guys. Oh, boy. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, in one particular post, I think, if I recall correctly, you wrote that we cannot control thought. We just cannot. A thought occurs, and then another thought occurs, and we have no control of whatever comes up, pops up into our consciousness. And I was wondering, could you address that? Could you talk about that?
Well, first, it was cool to meet you on Sunday, and I'm even happier to be here after spending some time with you on the weekend. Getting to know you. I think that comment or post or discussion revolved around the commonly held notion that, for the accepted idea that a thought will just pop into our head. And I think most people will agree that a thought would just pop into our head, and thoughts just pop into our head. I don't think there's anyone on this call who would probably disagree with that. Where it gets sticky, Diane, is that there's a misconception, which I would classify as a mistake, to say once you understand what thought is, that you now have the power to decide to follow a particular thought or not. That's where what I said may be a little different. So what I described in that poster, whatever it was, I can't remember, that every choice pops into our head as a thought. We may have a thought like, I want to shout at that. I want to shout at my daughter's teacher at school. I want to shout at her. I don't like the way she treated my daughter, and I get the thought, I want to give her a piece of my mind. That pops in there. And then we decide, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give it some space, and I'm going to see how this looks tomorrow. And that decision to no, I'm not going to do that, that's another thought that pops into our minds. And so on, and so on, and so on. And if the thought popped into our mind, okay, I'm going to tell that teacher, give that teacher a piece of my mind, that would be another thought that popped into our minds. So the notion that we have any power over deciding which thought we go with or which direction we take a thought, to me, is giving a human being a power that he or she does not possess. Mm. And that's quite unproductive. It paralyzes people. It paralyzes performers, for sure. So that's a distinct difference. I was giving a talk in the UK last week, and someone asked me about that distinct difference. He said to me after the talk, he said, it's a three principal teacher gave a talk here, and she said that once you understand what thought is, it then gives you the ability, I'm just paraphrasing what he said, it gives you the ability then to either act on the thought or not act on the thought. Once you see it's just thought. Are you saying something different, was his question to me. And I said, yes, I am saying something different. However, that's not to say that as a necessary first step to someone who has no idea that thoughts just come and go, that wouldn't be a first step in taking them down the road to see that no human being controls what thoughts occur to him or her. So I'm not saying the teacher he was describing was looking at it that way. I don't know. But it could be a first step, somewhat of a concession in order to be a good, in order to coach, in order to get people out of a funk. So in that case, I can see it. But as a foundation for how we work, I would think it's a faulty premise.
Okay. We're open for more questions now, so anyone who wants to ask a question, you can either physically wave your hand or use the manage participants down below, and you can raise your hand and you can then unmute yourself, or I'll unmute you. Sue. Okay, Sue.
Hiya. Can you explain why you think it's faulty? Why you think that that's, not true?
I can only tell you, Sue, what my experience is telling me and where my experience is taking me. So I'm not suggesting that I'm not suggesting that you should follow what I'm saying or believe what I'm saying. I would actually encourage you not to. I would do the opposite. I would encourage you to sit back and take a look at what your experience is telling you. So my experience is telling me that not only my own experience, but my experience in working for so many years in this field is that human beings simply do not control what thoughts occur to them in any way, shape, or form. My experience is that inside your body and mine right now, there are probably 1 billion mechanisms taking place, and we don't control any of them. They're just happening. The notion that somehow we control one thing out of 1 billion just isn't logical to me. We don't control anything except the thoughts that pop into our head. Nothing else. We don't control any of these things that are happening, but the thoughts that pop. Just that fact alone seems very questionable to me. Now, this is not the foundation, however. In other words, in order to understand or have an appreciation for what I'm saying, for the question that Diane's asking me, we have to go to the nuts and bolts of who a human being truly is. So it's almost a moot question about thought until you and I get a grasp of who we are not, and then get a grasp of who we are. Once we see that, I think this other question kind of clears itself up. What's up, Ollie? Hey, Robin. I see you too. You can't escape the picture. I see you. Okay.
So when obviously Sid Banks, I'm thinking back to Sid Banks and him saying, yeah, okay, we don't control our thoughts, right, but we have free will on what we do with them.
Yes. So but let's go back to who we are. Let's go there, and then I'm going to gladly point to my explanation of what Sid was saying in that comment. I mean, you're very right to point that out. It's cool that you point that out. So the question, let's say the question isn't where are these thoughts coming from, who controls them. The question, as I said, is who are you? So who are you? Are you Sue, Garret, Tracy, Diane, Allie, Talia, Anne-Marie, Jeanette, etc., Tanya? Or are you simply an image of consciousness? So are you, and when I say consciousness, another word for consciousness would be awareness, would be God's infinite being. Are you an actual entity, separate entity, walking around this world, smoking those things? Or are you an image, a refraction of God's infinite being? So now, if it's possible that each of us are refractions of God's infinite being, 8 billion of us, refracted from God, so God can know the world. God doesn't need us to know itself, but it needs us to know itself in the world. If that's true, then who is it? Where is it that thoughts rise and fall within this refraction of God? So the reason Sid Banks pointed to free will is because freedom, another word for God's infinite being, freedom, echoes in each of our minds because we are freedom itself. So it looks to us that it's us making these choices to follow my thoughts, to get on this webinar with Diane, to move my hand like this. But in essence, that's only because freedom echoes in our minds, because freedom is who we truly are. Freedom is another word for God, another word for love, another word for consciousness. So once we uncover, once we recognize who we are, then these type of questions become very obvious. Of course, it looks like you can decide what thoughts to follow and what to do. Of course, you are freedom itself. You are a refraction of freedom itself. Of course, it will look that way to you. It's simply helpful to know it's never true. It's never on you. It's never up to you. There is no you. That's what Sid Banks' work was all about. To remind us that we're not alone. We're not separate. We're one. Sid ultimately said, God's will is the only will there is. That's a quote from Sid. Ultimately. It's a trick, he said. It's a trick. That's Sid language. It's a trick. It looks like we have free will, but it's a trick. That's how Sid described it. To the separate self, it will always look like he or she has free will. From the perspective of the true self, one being, there's nothing to choose. There is no choice. There can't be free will. There's no choice. There's one.
So if in my mind, what's happening right now is I'm saying, so if I'm aligned and if I'm not separate, well, I'm never separate. It's impossible. I just think I am.
That's right. That's true. Yes.
And I'm a fraction of God and
refraction.
A refraction of God. Okay, thank you.
But it's a refraction of light. It's just a description. You could use other.
Yeah.
It's like a refraction of light. It's not. It's just a beam. It looks like it's a reflection. It's not really there. Refraction.
Okay. So because I'm a refraction of him, a refraction of, then his will becomes my will, and I'm in the flow. I'm with it. Okay. I think I've got it.
Look at your computer screens as infinite consciousness, eternal consciousness, however you want to describe it. God's one being, infinite being, awareness. And then look at each of us, if you're in that kind of view, where you have each of us on the screen. That is, in this case, 12 reflections of who we truly are. It's a great metaphor or illustration of how consciousness, how God works. So he breaks us up. He creates these images. These are just images. The screen will remain when this webinar is over. The images will go. We are just images on the screen of consciousness in order to experience each other. Actually, in order for God to see itself. This is how it works. This is a great illustration of what's happening. And the problem is, you guys, we forget that. We forget that, and we think we're actually individual. No, Vanessa, we don't have responsibility. We can talk about that in a second. So we forget that we're actually just refractions of one being. We share the screen of consciousness, and then we assume things like it's on us. We aren't even here. What happens when the webinar is over? Consciousness remains. What's permanent remains. What's transient disappears. And that's exactly, it's a perfect illustration for what we are. We are simply images on the screen, separate images on the screen, but we are still one. We are separate, but we remain one. God has the power to assume the form of each of us on the screen, but always remain as one. And we forget that. We forget that. So this work, go ahead, Vanessa. Why don't you just ask the question, because I can't read the whole thing. So it's cool.
Vanessa, are you going to ask the question, Vanessa?
Yeah, please, because he started one. I can't read the whole thing. Hey.
Let me unmute you.
Okay.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry to confuse you. I didn't mean to confuse you then. I was just asking that if you have no responsibility or free will, if, for me, I suffer from depression, suicidal depression, and have done for a long time, then there's nothing you can do, is there? It just feels like you're a puppet and that you can't, you're just taken along for the ride.
Well, and sorry about what you're dealing with. If you are a refraction, if our description is somewhat correct, and it's not going to be perfect, but if our description is somewhat correct, what that leads to the possibilities of who you are, creation itself, Vanessa, actually the opposite of what you're describing. So it's not that you're a puppet, you are creation, God, consciousness itself. That's the opposite. I'm not suggesting that you're a puppet. I am suggesting you are, who you truly are is consciousness itself, God itself. Again, going back to Sid. Sid had a quote he used a lot. He would say, God I am not. Who we truly are is God, and then we forget and we think we're a separate individual who the responsibility is all on us. And then we remember again, oh wait, I'm okay. God I am not. God I am, God. That's another quote from Sid. So who you truly are is creation, is imagination, is love, is courage.
But what if you can't feel those things? You can't find who you truly are. And you know, it doesn't matter how many people tell me you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings. Well, my thoughts are terrifying and my feelings are terrifying, so I can't get out of that. I can't feel. I know there's something else to me, but I can't get there.
Fair enough. Stay with me. I feel you. Very often I'm in the same place as you, I promise. So does it make sense to you that life is going to play out? So go back to the screen analogy, okay? The screen illustration, sorry. Well, and let's make it a movie. Let's say you and I are in a movie theater and we're watching a movie. We're at the cinema watching a movie. Do we have the power, Vanessa, to jump on the screen and change the course of the movie? Do we have the? I know it's a stupid question, but just say yes. Okay.
No.
What makes us think that we somehow have the power to jump on the screen of consciousness and change the course of history? We're you and me have been programmed and conditioned to believe that we have some power over how life, the images on the screen, history is playing out. Some personal power over that. And that is just not so. It is just not so. You have a brother in me. We have been told and by our parents and teachers and coaches and whomever, by society, and we fell for this thing that somehow we have a say in all this. And we're trying to have a say in all this, and we're trying to fix it and make it right and make it perfect. And in our attempt to do that, we're suffering, we're resisting, and we're seeking. We're resisting what is, and we're seeking something better in the next scene. And in doing that, we're suffering terribly. And it's a simple misunderstanding, Vanessa. And again, we all share it, and I totally share it with you, that somehow it's up to us. But it's not up to Vanessa or Garret or Tracy or Laura. It's not. It's simply not. It is up to us to, what we're doing right now is exactly what consciousness, how consciousness is playing out. He's put us, these refractions of you and me down here to have this conversation and to point each other towards love and towards understanding. All you've been trying to do your whole life, just like me, is find your way back to who you truly are.
Yeah.
And you didn't know who you truly were. So how could you find your way back? Just like me, I didn't know. And that's why I said to Sue, this idea about thoughts and this and that, let's just put that aside and let's get way in front of that. Who are we? And that's a whole different ballgame.
I just can't find out. There just seems to be so many layers.
Stay with me. Stay with me. You just did. For a split second, a minute ago, you did. You felt it for a split second. Did you just feel that? That feeling of, whoa, I saw you. I know that you felt it for a split second. Yes? Just a split second. That's your reminder. That is your reminder of who you are. That momentary glimpse into, whoa, wait a second. That's it. Most people, Vanessa, never feel that. They have numbed themselves to that. So the fact that you even felt it for 1 second, just hang with it, and stay with these supportive people on this call who can keep reminding each other of that. That's why we're here.
But it feels like my story, because we all have a story, but it feels like my story is like going in such a bad place. And of course I keep resisting it because I don't want it to go there, but it feels like I know how my story is going to end and it's not going to be good and there's nothing I can do about it.
Hang on. I can promise you not a lot, but I can promise you something, that what you just said is not true. I can promise you your story and in pure love. I can guarantee you that's true. There's not one doubt in my mind that's not true. It cannot work any other way. I promise you. Now, my hope for you, like it is for everyone, is before death, you experience that. You're going to experience it in death. I can promise you, you are. If it's not, don't have to worry about that. Upon death, all the striving and seeking and resisting and attachment to things that have no meaning, they completely fall away. I promise you, you return to who you truly are.
Well, that's what seems so inviting, because it seems so, that's the only way I'm ever going to get back to who I am.
That would be a mistake, in all due respect. You can't short circuit God's will. So just hang with me here. That would be a mistake. that momentary, that moment a second ago or 2 minutes ago when you saw for a brief second, that's it. It's present. It's not gone. You would not have felt it if it was. It's not gone. You're not broken. There's no way. You're far more not. You're actually in touch with something that very few people are in touch with. Most, Vanessa, numb themselves to life, never feel what you are feeling, never feel it, never truly feel it. So what we need to do is stop distracting ourselves out of it and go right to it. Go right to it. Just hang with it. Don't escape it. You can't. Just go right to it. I promise. Just hang out for the rest of the call, and we'll circle back to you and me after, because we're gonna keep looking at this. But you have a
Thank you.
no different than you, I promise. All right, we're just gonna we'll just stay with it.
Thank you so much.
You betcha.
Thank you, Vanessa. We have a question. I'm going to unmute you, Jeanette. Oh, shit. I unmuted the wrong person.
I'm here.
Okay.
No, I'm here. I'm really sorry. I've just run around like a complete nutter. Hi, Garret. It's my husband's birthday, and I've been making a nice meal for him and stuff. So that's why I've not been on camera. Also, because I've done 60 mile on my road bike today, and I've got a helmet head. So.
Oh, helmet head. Yes, I noticed that. That's a problem.
I know. I knew you would. There we go. Right. I have done some work with Claire Diamond, who I know is a student of yours, and I have to say I'm so close to this, so close to what you're talking about, and sometimes for not very long I'm really there, but I just struggle. I've done 30 years as a police officer. I'm a retired police officer. So what I'm understanding that you're saying is, for example, when somebody does something really bad, a criminal act, for example, murders somebody, what they have done is made the mistake of believing they are separate. Is that what that's my understanding, but I really just need to double check that is actually the case.
Okay, so the question then is, why would someone behave immorally? Okay, so that's the question. Mm-hmm. Why would someone behave immorally? Now, the ultimate answer to that question is not the answer I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you the ultimate answer first, and then I'm going to then we're going to back into kind of what you just said. Because the ultimate answer is there is no why. Okay, and I want to be clear about that. It's all playing out in consciousness as it's going to play out. And there is nothing anyone can do to stop those types of things from happening. And it would be a mistake to say that if this person understood what I'm about to say, then these kind of things wouldn't happen, because that's not within our power. So we're just making a concession to what I just said in an explanation to explain. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't make sense, Trace? Because it's, as I said, it's all playing out on the screen as it's going to play out. And we don't have the power to stop it from playing out. So I'm making a concession as I say that the only thing The only thing, and I mean only thing, that springs ethical / moral / productive loving behavior is the understanding of who you truly are. If you understand that you are one being, that you share one being, it is impossible to hurt another human being. Impossible. So that's what you were saying. The reason someone would murder someone else, would behave immorally, if there was a reason, I'm not making a concession, is that that person has forgotten who they truly are. And that person, in hurting another person, is actually searching for who they truly are, as crazy as it sounds.
It doesn't sound crazy to me.
Me either.
It just doesn't.
Well, that's good. That's good that it doesn't. That's progress.
But I just wanted to check that is that's correct. And actually, unfortunately, there are nowhere near enough people who know who they are. And those of us that do will forget.
Well, hang on, Jeanette. Let's be clear about that. I know what you're saying, but everyone knows at their core who they truly are. Everyone. It's so easy to be conditioned out of it. From the minute we're born, we are conditioned out of it. We are told we are our bodies, we are our minds, we are our looks, we are our gender, we are our sexual orientation, it's all nothing. It's all a big nothing. It's nothing to do with who we are. And we forget that. And that's what this work in my mind is all about. That's what Claire is, as you know, that's what Claire's work is all about. That's what Ali's work is all about. Yeah. Is simply reminding the individual, the other, the group, who we truly are. And yes, see that where thought comes in, a couple of you guys have talked about thought. Where thought comes in is, I said it before briefly. So the question would be this. Are we, as I said, 8 billion separate entities, and then thought creates separate realities of the same world? So is it that thought in the middle, and then we see a different world because of thought? Or is it we are one being, thought veils the one being, creating 8 billion different worlds? I would suggest it's the latter. And thought's still the middleman, so that's where many have it right. But the question is, what are the bookends here? How does it work? And our culture, from the minute, look at Ali's kids in that car, they are being taught right now that they are separate entities, and these separate entities live in one world. This is simply not true. There is no proof of that. We've accepted something that is not, there's no proof. Try to find that world. Go try to find it. No one can find it. You can't find the world. This is why physicists keep looking for the universe, and they keep having to go further and further and further, because the universe doesn't exist outside of consciousness. It doesn't exist outside of their experience. It only exists in experience. It's not there. This bottle of water is not there outside of experience. Without the power to experience, without consciousness, this doesn't exist. We've got it backwards. And it's so mind-blowing because we've so fallen for it. Even saying it to me, it sounds weird still. Because we're so taught that this is made of matter, this is real. And if I couldn't experience this, this would still exist independent of me. That's simply not true. Without me, this isn't here.
Yeah.
So we've got the whole shooting match backwards. This materialistic paradigm. My hope, check this out. My hope is that if the earth is still here 1,000 years from now, that this period in time, the materialistic paradigm, it will be looked at like the Dark Ages. Like, how did they think that? How did they think that? But the fear, if I could control any of this, my fear would be, under the materialistic paradigm, we're going to kill each other. We're just not going to last. That we're separate and the world is separate and objects are real. Go get them to be happy. How's that working? Yeah.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. It can't. It's a law. It can't work. It's a lie. So, yeah, it's back to your question. Those who hurt, those who damage, those who take more than they give, they have simply forgotten who they are. They are trying, scratching and clawing to try to find their way back to God. They're suffering so, and they don't know how to. They don't know what to do about it.
In Claire's words, they're trying to secure a self that simply doesn't exist.
You have to understand the self, the separate self, and I'm sure Claire has told you this, the separate self is simply an activity of consciousness. It's not an entity. And an activity will always seek more doing to keep itself going. So a whirlpool in a stream needs more activity for it to stay alive. If the stream calms, the whirlpool dissolves. So the separate self, which is an activity, the ego, which is an activity, will seek other doing in order to keep itself spinning. That's why we always seek things to do, we seek distractions and substances and techniques and gambling and sex and these types of things in order to fix this. But that's playing right into the ego's hand. The ego is an activity. And if we seek more activity, we rev it up more. It doesn't exist. It's not an entity. People talk about the ego as if it's a thing. It's not a thing. It's an activity. It's not there. You can't find it. That's why I said before to Diane in the beginning, where is that person that's suffering? Where is that person that's nervous? Show me that person. You can't find her. Diane was like, right. That thing doesn't exist. That's an entity. That's not an entity. It's an activity. That's why I said to Vanessa, go right to the heart of that activity. Challenge that activity. Where are you? Show yourself. Don't escape it. Go right at it. Who is it that suffers? Show me this person. Show me this person. Yeah. You can find the person. It's not there.
That alone is mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing.
What you've just said. It's just game-changing and mind-blowing.
And Claire is a fantastic teacher. She makes me look awful. She's fantastic. Stick with her.
Well, she's incredible. So she's a gift, and I'm very fortunate, and I'll shut up now, but I'm so fortunate that I found her before anybody else. That's my personal view anyway, for the reasons you've just said. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you too. Thank you.
Okay, there are no raised hands, so I'd like to, if I may, last Sunday you said something that that switched on a light for me, and I'm kind of more attentive. I don't know what word to use, but you said to me, you said ego is an entity, or ego is what did you just say just now? You said ego doesn't exist.
An activity.
It's an activity. Okay, thank you.
The experience of ego exists, but it's not that. It's not you can experience an activity, but it's not right. It's an activity, not an entity.
It's all made up.
Well, you have to understand, and is Vanessa still with us?
Yes, she is.
Hey, okay, good. I was looking at your ceiling there. Okay, so cool. It doesn't need a paint job. It looks good, Vanessa. You're all you see mine here in the office. It's awful. But what we forget, or what we overlook, so easy to overlook, is that the separate self, another word for ego, is a necessary activity of consciousness. Without it, we don't have this conversation. We're fighting something that's ultimately necessary and valuable, and we're turning it into something that's a problem. So go back to how it works. Consciousness, God, however you want to say it, assumes the form of separate selves, egos, in order for it to experience the world. It's necessary. We're fighting something that is necessary, is valuable. We don't have this conversation. We don't get to explore nature. We don't get to hang out with each other, go to the movies, talk about our children. We don't get our sports without it. Again, the separate self are simply activities of consciousness hanging out down here so we can get to know, so consciousness can get to know itself in the world. We have been programmed that it's a problem. It's not that the ego is bad, that a feeling of insecurity or nervousness, as you were feeling before the call, Diane. And me too. I was feeling nervous too. I was feeling nervous just like you. Of course we were. We're downloaded from the same source. Of course we're both going to feel nervous. Of course. But we're taught that that's a problem. That is necessary in order for us to hang out, to explore the world, to explore each other. And we're fixing something that's not broken. We're fighting something that's a blessing. It's a blessing. That's why I told Vanessa, you're in touch with it. You're more, Vanessa, you know that you're doing it. The feeling that's accompanying your resisting is screaming at you, you're fixing something that's not broken. The reason that it's such a blessing for you is because most have numbed themselves so much to life that they don't even know what they're doing. You're so aware of your own being, it's not even funny. You're actually aware of it. You're all over it. Don't let anybody tell you that that's wrong, that there's something wrong. There is not. There is something right. It's the opposite. So that's what we were saying last weekend. We are simply taught that feeling of separation that accompanies God knowing its own being in the world, that feeling of separation is wrong. No, it's right. It's right. It's not a problem. In sport, you guys maybe just know this, in sport, one of the things that paved the way for my career in the performance field. And I didn't know what I was saying when I was younger. Truly, I stumbled into this. In other words, I knew something, but I didn't know what I knew. And that was that you never have to fix your state of mind in order to excel. All the other mental coaches and psychologists were telling the performers, no, you've got to be in some state to be your best. And for whatever reason, it occurred to me that just wasn't true. That cannot be true. And I started telling athletes, don't fix anything. You can perform from any place, from any feeling state. And for some reason, they believed me. And we started to do okay. It's crazy. I didn't know what I was even saying. I knew we were fixing something that wasn't broken. I knew as a player myself when I was younger that the psychologists were telling me to fix something that wasn't broken. There was no way that could work. And it wasn't working. So anyway, does that make sense about the activity of ego, Diane?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Ego, the separate self, is no more than an activity of consciousness, a necessary activity of consciousness.
Unnecessary.
Necessary. Necessary, yeah. Of course, we wouldn't be here if not for that.
Yes, because we were debating whether ego would be necessary for us, or if it's useful anymore to us. And
there is no us. There is no us without ego. There is only one. Well, there is no separate us. There is no Diane and Vanessa and Tracy and Ali without ego. There isn't us. We could never hang out and go to a game. we could never just. It's not happening. Now it's important to know that. You see, where it gets sticky is we forget that and we take all this so seriously. So that's why it's important to know that. To know that in between thoughts, Vanessa, just like you experienced in that brief moment in between thoughts and you felt it, in between thought, we return to who we truly are. In deepest of sleeps, we return to who we truly are. I dare to say, when we get intimate, there's a brief moment of returning to who we are. And when we die, we return to who we truly are. And it seems like, going to the first example, in between thought, it seems like that's happening so quickly, so we can't catch it, right, Vanessa? That's how I came and went so quickly, you know? I totally get that. But the thing is, time only exists to the separate self, to the ego. So that the ego will shrink time. It will shrink time. To the true self, there's only now. Only now. So the more you understand who you truly are, the less important time becomes. It's kind of like you can live in that a little bit longer. That's why kids live in it longer than us. Look at Robin there. She just lives it. She's always living it. She's in it longer than us because they don't know time. They haven't been programmed about time yet, or space for that matter. So that's why I say it's available now. It's not, we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait. Anybody else have a question? I like this group you have, Diane. It's like a group I didn't know. Very, really, Sheila Maslin just dropped on. This is pretty cool.
No, actually, I don't mind brief moments of silence. I think it's silence just helps us absorb what you're saying, and it gives more of a sense of what you've just been talking about. And incidentally, I record all my calls with a gallery view. I do not, so that we can get the sense of community, so that we can really actually see later each other's faces, which I love. So
silence is the only true teacher. It's the only true teacher. Silence. The intellect cannot access what comes before it. So we will always struggle. We will always struggle when we try to put words to the true self or God or how all this plays out. That's why I said before that description is not perfect, but silence is. Silence is. So reticence, silence, stillness is truly the only teacher. That's, go back to you, Vanessa. Sorry to keep going back to you, but it's that moment in between thoughts, the silence where you saw. And I had the same experience as you. That's teaching you. It's reminding you that you, who you are. Unfortunately, people try to strategize around silence. They try to meditate or go for walks in the woods or runs on the beach or something in an attempt to find silence. So silence isn't circumstantial. Silence has nothing to do with noise, nothing to do with sounds. Silence can be found anywhere. You don't need, silence is not the absence of noise. So we forget that and we try to strategize and find silence circumstantially. And sometimes when we do that, we have the most noise in our head. This is classic, of course. Silence is often found with a friend in complete chaos. You can be with a friend in the middle of anywhere, and all of a sudden it's completely silent with yourself, with your pet. Yeah. Sometimes you find in some teachers, the teachers I respect the most, they're the most silent. It's kind of crazy. They just hang out in silence sometimes, even in front of the group. Okay, let's talk. Silence.
Okay, I at this point I don't have any questions, and I'd like to invite you guys to ask questions if you do have any.
Grace, is that you?
Yeah, I just wondered if you could, well, for me, my experience has been the more I've looked towards what I imagine is the true self, or that feeling that I'm aware of but can't really articulate, where it's quiet and less noisy, it seems to me that there is less noise the more I look towards the true self.
Okay.
And for me, I've had a similar experience to Vanessa. It was a long time ago now, but I used to experience an awful lot of suicidal thinking, and now I don't. And I know I'm not in control of that, but it just seems to me that the more I look towards my true self, the less that thinking seems to arise within this refraction of God.
I would tell you that it's so obvious that God, that your experience is playing out as you described, out of your control. But it seems to me that it's taken us here to a place where you can explain that to everyone for the benefit of everyone. And that's out of our control too.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help whether or not I open my mouth.
That's an example of consciousness playing out as consciousness, love playing out as love will play out. So Vanessa and everyone else on this call has a support in you, and that's unbeatable. And the article you wrote about that a couple weeks ago, I discussed it in London. It was so powerful. I mean, you just nailed it. You couldn't have nailed it any better. It was, and we're all, as you said in the article, we're all trying to extinguish the separate self, the ego. But the separate self and the ego doesn't need extinguishing. It can't be extinguished. It's not even a thing. How can you extinguish something that's not a thing? And that's what we're here for. We're here to remind each other of that. It's emotional to even consider it. That's how you know we're on the right track. We get emotional. It's such a blessing to even have the slightest inkling that this is true. The slightest inkling. You know? Everyone is doing what they can to extinguish something that's not even real. And as I said before, in the process of extinguishing an activity, it is causing the activity to whirlpool more.
Yeah, that's my experience.
It's so obvious once you see it.
Yeah.
We haven't talked in this conversation about controlling thought or choosing thought is how we started it, or what thought is better. This is all more activity. Sure, it's helpful to know that thought superimposes itself over who we truly are, creating separate selves. That's valuable to know. That's it. You don't need to do anything else with thought. That's it. That's it. Leave thought there. Thoughts come and go. Why would we ever dig into something that comes and goes? Tell me what doesn't come and go. Tell me what's eternal, what's infinite, what's unchangeable, what doesn't appear and disappear. Tell me what that is, and we'll talk about that. That is consciousness. That is who you truly are. That is God. That we can have a conversation about. Thought, no thank you. It comes and goes. Insecurity, no thank you. It comes and it goes. Money, no thanks. It comes and it goes. We don't need to talk about that. Wins and losses, same thing in sport. I'm not talking about that, guys. Let's talk about who you truly are. What is permanent? What is real? What is durable, resilient, free? Let's talk about that. What gender you are? I'm not talking about that. What color your skin? Why are we talking about that? What be like a man or a woman? What this is nothing. These are things that come and go. We have gotten caught up in the transient. We've gotten caught up in these images on the screen, and we've forgotten there's a screen behind it. We've forgotten it. It's crazy. And we're killing each other. I was telling a story. I don't know when I told the story, but I was telling a story about my experience at a bar mitzvah. So I got dragged to this bar mitzvah, which is embarrassing because I should have gone. It was my friend's kid. I mean, it was just terrible, but I didn't want to go, but I went. And I was resisting like a jerk, like pure resistance of being there, seeking a better place to go. How can I escape this place? How can I get out of here? I'm sitting in the back of the temple during the service, and I'm looking at people like, that guy was a problem. He was obnoxious. The kid needs better discipline. That woman, she's complaining about something and she's not singing the hymns right. Everybody was a problem. Now, this is happening in my tortured head. I didn't show this, thankfully. My separate self, my ego, was raging as I resisted it, as I sought a better place to be. as I tried to escape. And then, luckily, it all shifted. And pure love emerged. God, I am not. God, I am. And I looked at the same guy who was obnoxious, and I saw myself. I looked at the poor kid who was just trying to find his way, and I saw myself. I looked at the woman who had whatever, and I saw myself. I saw myself everywhere I looked. It was amazing. What I was really seeing was love. I was seeing God's face everywhere I looked. And a minute before that, I was in pure ego, pure resentment, pure judgment, arrogance. It was disgusting. I mean, it was just awful. But somehow I hung in there, and when I stopped resisting, it all fell away. And that's our reminder of who we are. We're simply refractions of God's infinite being put on this planet, which is another refraction of God's infinite being. So God can know itself in the world. That's it. That's what we're here for. No more, no less. It's not complicated. And it's so easy to forget this. It is so easy to forget it. It's so easy. Our conditioning wants us, has us, tries to get us to forget it. Not on purpose. It's the nature of it. And if you've caught the slightest glimpse of it, you're going to want to share that. You're going to want to share that with others. You're going to want to share it. Of course you're going to want to share it because we are a shared being. Of course we're going to want to share it. That's why, gosh, 30 years, 20, whatever years ago, that's why my whole, it just became not logical to do anything else for a living to me. This trumped everything. This discussion, you could tell me I could go play Pebble Beach right now or have this discussion. I'd choose this discussion. This discussion, nothing trumps looking in this direction with collectively. Nothing. There's nothing in my life that could trump it. That's how obvious it is. And when you find other separate selves who are looking in this direction, have a glimpse, that's what I keep saying about the support system. Stick with each other because we could easily forget. That doesn't mean insulate yourselves. That's not what I'm saying. But it's easy to fall out of it and forget. And that's what we're here for. To remind each other who we are.
And on that note, I'm going to keep organizing these calls, which just confirmed to me.
Right.
And secondly, I'm aware that it's nearly 8:15. I'm wondering if we could address a last question. Yes, Vanessa said, so God decides what we experience, with a question mark.
100%. And God would never mess around. Just hang in there. Hang in there. It's not for naught, Vanessa. You'll see. Just hang in there. It's not. God's not. God, it's a misunderstanding that God wants anyone to suffer. It's a misunderstanding. God doesn't know suffering. So just hang in there. You'll see. Hang with us. Hang with everyone. All of us when we suffer. It's okay. It's quite normal. But God doesn't know suffering. God doesn't know resistance. Thus, God doesn't know separation. Thus, God can't know suffering. It is only us. And he puts us here to remind each other of that. He puts us here so we can experience, so God can experience the world. And he does that. He does that through us.
I just typed it out because I want to remember it. And I think we can end this beautiful call here unless Sue raised her hand.
Oh, okay.
Okay, great.
Next one.
And this will be lower hand. Okay, I think I would love personally to end it on this note. He puts us here so that God can experience the world. I think that's boom.
I'm happy for that. I'm happy.
Okay.
All right, you guys.
Garret, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the chance to meet all you guys and hang out.
I will call you again, and I would really want to have you here again 6 months down the line. It's really been, I know I don't have words. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, you guys. It's mostly women for joining and for spending some time, and see you guys later. Unmute yourselves and just say bye, your byes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. I'm going now.